Welcome. This presentation is all about the mystery of fixing operational difficulties that you may have. At KPI, we approach all difficulties like a mystery, because that is what they are. Your company has put together personnel, processes, and tools that make a strong force. Still, there is something that is not working well. It happens to everybody. The needs of the customer change. That changes the functions of the business, and that changes the processes and tools each department needs to get the job done. After a while, your team has lost some of its strength, and you are losing your competitive advantage. In business, that's a problem you can't have for very long. That is where we come in. KPI looks at the large organization and the smaller departments to isolate, identify, and course correct the aspects of your business that aren't performing well. In order to do that, we must unravel the mystery of your difficulties. Why do we refer to the problem as a mystery? Well, because operational slowdowns are never due to just one factor, one tool, or one function. You could throw a tool at the problem, and it will likely just produce more of the problem at a faster pace. You can use a process methodology, such as Lean or Six Sigma, and it will likely make parts of your organization more efficient or more effective, but it won't engage cross-functional slowdowns. The focus is too narrow. There are a lot of things that you can do, and we recommend all of them, so long as you have the excess personnel, the right talents, the organizational patience, and the available capital to use them completely. We have the personnel, the talents, and the availability to execute on your deliverables in a way that will save you 40 to 80% of the cost, along with delivery on a shorter timeline than you doing this in-house. Every mystery is the following core elements: characters, setting, plot, clues, assumptions, distractions, structure, conclusion. You'll find these elements in your mystery as well, though common business practices don't use these words. We'll go into each of these in more detail. First, let's take a look at the characters in your mystery. It's important to remember that your characters aren't always people. They can also be a place, such as a site, region, or functional area, and they can also be a thing, such as facilities, tools, systems, or the logic that those systems or tools use. Your main characters are always the following. First, we have the customer as the victim. Our victim comes in three flavors: past, present, and future. Who is the problem impacting? Next, we have our problem solvers as investigators. We have our lead investigator, who is the person or persons responsible for solving the problem. They work with their investigative team, the persons who aid the lead in solving the problem, and these may include your subject matter experts, administrative aides, vendors, and project or program management, as well as others. And lastly, we have the business as suspect and culprit. The suspect is the first attempt at finding the problem areas. It may be correct, but you'd have to prove it. It may be incorrect, but you'd have to disprove it in order to focus on finding the real problem areas. The full problem is usually unknown at the beginning. The other characters are just as important, as one or more of them is likely to be your culprit. Who are they really? How did they get into this picture? And what don't we know about them yet? Next, let's take a look at the plot of our mystery. The first question we want to ask ourselves is, well, what's your problem? Is something missing? And if so, was it lost or stolen? Is something new needed? If so, can it be addressed by what we have? Or does something new need to be built or bought? Was something or someone damaged? If so, can it be fixed? Can you stop the damage from happening again? Or is this simply a matter of justice, however you define it? Next, how do we find our clues? Well, a couple of methods. We can talk with the people involved. We can talk with the people upstream and downstream of our problem. And lastly, we're going to reconstruct the problem using data. Finally, how do we know which clues are important? Well, does it fit with your reconstruction? Another question to ask is, does it make sense with what you know? And if it doesn't, does it make sense as new information? Lastly, what are the gaps in your reconstruction? Looking at the setting of our mystery, there are a couple questions we want to ask ourselves. When does the problem happen? Did it happen on a big project, a small project, or is this operational, meaning it's happening fairly regularly? Is there a trigger to this problem? Next, where does the problem happen? Does it happen at some sites or regions, or is it happening all across your enterprise? Does it affect a few people, or does it affect everyone? And next, how does the problem happen? Now, this may not be known at the outset, but something we discover as we go through the process. Now we come to the most important part of our mystery, our clues. It's important to remember that information is king. All information has the potential to be a clue. And information becomes a clue if it helps to fill a gap in your reconstruction. You want to make sure that you see the problem for yourself. You don't have others' understanding, and they know things that you don't. Most of us filter out the obvious and the oblivious when we recall a situation. That filtered information could be among your most important clues. And lastly, you want to call in the experts. And when I say experts, that could be subject matter experts or simply lay people at the problem sites. Now we come to assumptions, which is one of the two most commonly overlooked aspects of any mystery. First, we don't want to attempt to predetermine the scope. The problem may be larger or smaller than you originally believed it to be. Your understanding of the problem will clarify as the process goes on. Next, don't accept another person's scope. Initial information can be scope limiting, which will hamper you from getting to the full scope and consequently the full solution. Next, we want to look at what are the untrue facts. There are a lot of times that we're given incomplete facts. For example, I breathe better here because it's an arid climate. Or, you get 40 miles to the gallon if you're on a flat highway with little traffic. In DC politics, there's this concept of a true fact, and that's a fact that is real, complete, easily replicated, and universal. Next, we come to our distractions, the other most commonly overlooked aspect of a mystery. First, we'll look at what are our competing priorities. In your organization, are there other major initiatives going on at the same time that you're trying to fix this problem? Are there budget constraints that hamper what you can do? Is there executive or managerial pressure to get some solution in place soon? Is there a deadline that you have to deliver by? Are there resource constraints on your primary or secondary characters? And lastly, is there low-hanging fruit that frankly is just too tempting to go after that will keep you from getting to the whole solution? It's important to note that nothing helps a problem continue like a distracted focus. Underlining all the components we've reviewed so far is the structure of our mystery. We want to make sure that we understand the voice of the customer or the voice of the victim. How's the victim being victimized? What's it costing them? Is it costing them time, money, functionality, possession, or in its worst case, life? And lastly, is the victim really a victim? I think we can all remember the story of the boy who cried wolf. Next, we want to look at the voice of the process. Is the process deliberately faulty? An example of this would be that a refrigerator is not meant to be a freezer. Or, is the process simply insufficient to the task? An example of this would be, most freezers simply don't have the capacity of a refrigerator. And lastly, we want to look at the voice of the business. Is the culprit a victim itself? Is the culprit causing the problem as a result of compensating for it or their own problems? And finally, we come to the conclusion of our mystery. We want to make sure that we catch the culprit before the act. The whole point of many mysteries is to keep the problem from happening again. You must determine when, where, and how it will happen next, and you must intercede before it can happen again. How do we address this problem? Well, it's typically addressed in one of three ways: defense, detainment, or destruction. Defense is systematically preventing a culprit that can't be completely stopped. Team sporting events typically provide the best example of defense. Next is detainment. Detainment is a means to contain or isolate the culprit so that the problem doesn't occur for a time. And lastly, we have destruction, which is incapacitating the problem so that it no longer exists. And finally, we come to our aftermath. Are the victims better off with the solution? If they answer yes, then we've built a good solution. The question that's usually asked at the end of a project is everyone happy with the solution? And invariably the answer to this is no. You can't please everyone all the time. But if we've created a better way forward for our victims, and they agree, then we have done our best work. Thank you for taking part in this presentation. We will follow this up with an example of our mystery and elements in practice very shortly. We look forward to seeing you again soon.